The name of the presentation was Tips for Managing Livestock, Land and Water Resources During a Drought. Well, the number one point, I think, and I mentioned it several times, was don't wait too long to begin to destock. Have a destocking plan that is dependent on the date at which you receive rainfall or don't receive rainfall, and then begin to destock quickly if you haven't received the normal amount of rain in a timely fashion and it's obvious that you're not going to grow as much grass. So we need to protect the land, we need to protect the livestock, and we need to protect the people. And to protect the land, I always like to be rotational grazing, because if I have to move out of the first pasture or two in a rotation quicker than normal, or I've had to defoliate those pastures to a greater degree than normal, that tells me I'm not growing as much feed this year. And again, if I just wait until I've taken all the feed to start the destock, I have to destock everything all at once. If I will begin to destock early in these dry situations, I will get away with destocking much less. So again, key point. If cattle body condition gets lower than normal for the time of year, that's probably another warning sign that we're overgrazing, that we're hurting the cattle. Let's sell some now as body condition begins to erode to avoid having all of the animals get thin or lose condition on us. But the destocking plan, you should determine which animals you want to sell first and when they need to be sold to stay ahead of the curve. So that's one of the key issues. I also presented a couple of charts, an annual cattle flow chart, which is really a Gantt chart with cattle classes on the left-hand side, time plotted, or activities plotted across the side. Like start with the beginning inventory, how many are born, how many die, how many are sold, what's your ending inventory, and people can use that to project. And then you can take the animals shown in the sold column and you can put those in a sales worksheet that says, okay, how much will they weigh, how much will they bring per pound, what will be the total receipts. And if you price those accurately in relationship to each other, that will help you determine which class of cattle you might want to sell first. And then you can also look at the residual inventory based on those sales and say, okay, does that give me a good rebuilding opportunity after when it finally does rain and I can build back? So you may change, you may work through 2 or 3 scenarios and say, okay, this reduces inventory nicely, but it leaves us in a bad spot for rebuilding inventory. And so I kind of showed them a few examples of how we might analyze carefully what we should sell first to both sell profitably and to rebuild with the least cost interference as possible. I've had the privilege of working with a lot of people who were employees. They weren't owners, but they were good people. And their emotions are touched as much by managing through drought as the owners. They're very concerned about the financial situation of the owner in these times. They're very concerned about the cattle. They are very reluctant to sell all the cattle because they'd like to keep a nucleus of a herd to keep the genetics intact that they've striven to develop over time. And also they're concerned about the well-being of the land and what we might be doing to the land if we keep it too heavily stocked during the drought. But they also know as we reduce stock, we've taken away some economic privilege going into the future. And so it's how do we walk the tightrope and balance the two appropriately so we don't harm the land, we don't harm the cattle, and how small can we keep the economic impact of that and still protect the land and the cattle and the people.